You guys are just going to repeat after me. From Turtle Island to Palestine! Turtle Island to Palestine! Occupation is a crime! Occupation is a crime!
That's a little of what it sounded like last Wednesday in Toronto during an annual rally and march ostensibly in support of the people of the Grassy Narrows First Nation in Northwestern Ontario. The rally attracted about 8,000 people, including students from 15 Toronto public schools. There were children as young as 8, but mostly from high schools, according to the school board. Their parents had to sign permission forms for the field trip as part of learning about the struggle of this Indigenous community, who for 50 years has been demanding justice and health care after a pulp and paper conglomerate and a chemical factory polluted their river system with mercury. 90% of the residents now suffer from mercury poisoning. But somewhere along the way, it's reported the Toronto students were encouraged to chant pro-Palestinian political slogans. Videos from the march show one Toronto teacher with a megaphone wearing a Grassy Narrows t-shirt leading the pupils with a chant calling for Palestine to be free, while another chants occupation is a crime. There have been calls for the province to now take control of the Toronto School Board after what Ontario's Premier Doug Ford called the indoctrination going on. And he said what happened was disgusting. The Education Minister, Jill Dunlop, slammed the activist teachers who she said turned the field trip into a political event and compromised the students' safety, not to mention lied to the parents.
Every time there's a situation like this that erodes the public trust and tarnishes all teachers or tarnishes the whole school board, like I've seen the calls for us to now be taken over.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Tuesday, September 24th, 2024. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, made possible in part with the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky Gluskin Charitable Foundation.
This is an audition to be a cantor.
But I don't want to be a cantor.
I wasn't raised with any religion.
You're Jewish, though.
The heartbeat of
I welcomed Sam into my community by first taking his foreskin and next showing him the beautiful Twister bagel.
Culturally Jewish is the only podcast covering the weird, wide world of independent Canadian Jewish art.
Listen to Culturally Jewish at the cjn.ca/culture or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Toronto District School Board issued an apology to parents last week and vowed to investigate what happened and pledged support for the children or their caregivers who were emotionally hurt by participating in the march. This apology did not go over well with the parents and politicians who called it lame. It also didn't please some of the pro-Palestine teachers who had been singled out, including Anne-Marie Longpre, who previously supported a pro-Palestinian walkout with her students in 2021 at a different school and was the subject of a complaint to the Ontario Teachers College because of it, but remains in good standing. Meanwhile, teacher Nigel Bariff, who is also vice president of the union representing 11,000 elementary school teachers in Toronto, posted that the school board caved into pressure from Jewish lobby groups and called the apology an example of anti-Palestinian racism. Shelley Laskin is a school trustee in Ward 8. She represents a heavily Jewish area, Eglinton Lawrence and Toronto St. Paul's. Laskin's also a member of the board's Jewish Heritage Committee. She felt the fallout of the field trip was so big that she needed a special board meeting scheduled to discuss what happened, and it now is set for this Wednesday. Shelley Laskin joins us now to share why it's a really bad look for the embattled Toronto board, already under intense pressure these past few years to deal meaningfully with spiking anti-Semitism. Good to see you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Before we go any into the details, what has it been like for you as school trustee since the news broke about what happened? What reaction or feedback are you been getting from people?
I think since the news broke late Wednesday afternoon, it was really asking senior staff for some answers, because I began immediately to see things on social media and to get emails and direct communication from not just parents and caregivers but general community members and constituents, not even necessarily in my ward, but we're seeking answers for exactly what happened. The only thing I do know is I do not believe any of the schools that I directly represent in my ward were involved, but we are waiting for all kinds of clarifications.
What is the general tone of some of these letters?
People have more questions than answers. People are wondering what it is the school board is doing, if in fact it sanctioned the excursions that they saw that included the social media posts of protesting at Queen's Park. You know, and in all of this, from my perspective, what was most troubling is Grassy Narrows River Run is an annual event, and it is to raise awareness about the mercury poisoning at Grassy Narrows that are directly affecting the Indigenous people. And all of that now seems lost in the controversy of what actually happened, what the students and teachers were involved in. And I feel bad about that, in the sense that something that was meant to be good and educational, I guess it still is educational, but it wasn't, for me, what I have heard were not necessarily the intended curricular connections that were meant to be made, which our policy dictates. To begin any sort of field trip, there needs to be curricular connections. And we just need answers. I'm not sure how many schools actually participated beyond the educational opportunities at the Grange Park. I don't know why they didn't turn back when they felt safety of kids, could have been compromised.
In your e-blast, Shelley, you said you were deeply concerned and upset and angry. Why are you angry?
I'm angry because I saw children put in what I felt was compromising positions, chanting things that they might not have had the background to understand, encouraged by some teachers to be participating in activities that I think went way beyond the scope of what the intended excursion was. Angry that there are no answers for this right now, that it's going to take time to get answers. Frustrated that students experienced harm. It was clear, if in fact what was posted on social media is accurate, that a Jewish student was told when she showed that it was uncomfortable to her teacher, said, get over it. A student that recently immigrated from India was told to be called a colonizer, to get over it. I mean, these are the things that have been reported. And that makes me very upset for families, very upset for Jewish and other families who are concerned about anti-Semitism and anti-Semitism in our schools, which we have been dealing with significantly, really surfaced in 2021, but especially since October 7th. And trustees like me have been trying their best through the Jewish Heritage Committee and through speaking with staff in equity to ensure that anti-Semitism within our classrooms is taken seriously and we educate against it. And I'm still very concerned about what is and isn't happening.
It's been determined that one of the teachers involved did this in 2021. You mentioned 2021, the Hamas-Israel 10-day war. And now this, apparently she's doing it again with her new school, transferred to a new school, doing it again with pro-Palestinian chants. How do you, as a school board, what responsibility for the teacher's conduct is, can you do anything, or is this a Ontario College of Teachers bailiwick, then you have no jurisdiction over your teachers?
As a trustee, I certainly can't do anything except to continue to draw it to the attention of senior staff. There's only one staff member that's actually accountable to us, and that's the Director of Education. And then we have to hold the Director of Education accountable for every other staff member. But it is clear that complaints made to the Ontario College of Teachers take an incredibly long time to go through their process, and there's no ability to follow up on them. The only thing that's ever posted publicly is when, in fact, there's a discipline issue. If there's been any other sort of direction provided, we're not privy to that. And you would have to probably ask the head of our People and Culture Division, the staff member, if in fact we have the ability to actually fire people. I believe we do. And I'm not sure about any of these investigations that have happened internally because as trustees, we are not privy to that information.
What I'm hearing is that there are things you would like to see happen, but you can't actually do anything about it because this is a human resources issue, right?
Correct.
What policies are there in place that you can bring in? I see, for example, there are things that you suggested: code of conduct, human rights, equity and inclusion, combating hate strategy. Those are things you can.
So trustees set out the policy, and we have clear policies on excursions and all the other issues you've raised. But you have to entrust your staff to implement those policies through what we call procedures. And the procedures for excursions are crystal clear. Not all the guidelines that were set out in those protocols were followed. So the issue is now trying to get underneath how many schools were involved. Did all schools go to both parts of the Grassy Narrows River Run, which included the event at Grange Park and then continued on to Queen's Park? Who vetted them? Was that information known at the time? What was the commitment made to parents when they signed off to approve their child going on the excursion? Those are questions that we really need answers. And, you know, I understand this is 15 of our 563 schools. So it's not as if there was a massive uptake in this excursion. That being said, if there was harm caused to one child within our care, parents have every right to be concerned and seek answers, and we're trying to seek answers on behalf of our communities.
What kind of, you wrote, remediation or education do you think is appropriate now?
Well,
it's a teachable moment, but...
Right, it is a teachable moment, and I think for all the kids affected in those classrooms, my expectation is supports are being provided for them, and that was a commitment made by the acting director in her public statement. I'm not sure if we, as a school board, have all those supports in hand.
Okay, so what would I guess? Can you give me an example of what that kind of?
Well, say the child's asking questions about what the slogans they heard meant and what that means for a child who is Jewish or not Jewish, because this is not, anti-Semitism cannot be seen as only affecting the Jewish community. It affects all of us. Any form of hate affects all of us because we have to have safe places for all our kids. And that chant certainly compromised, from my perspective, the sense of belonging for all students in our system. And that's a serious issue and needs to be confronted. And my concern is that, you know, we are developing a strategy to combat anti-Semitism. It is a process. But until then, every form of hate needs to be addressed, and appropriate education has to be provided so that kids feel that they're safe and belonging, not just some kids, but all kids. And when you have young kids dealing with this extremely complex political issues, it's important to ensure their understanding ends with their sense of belonging in that classroom and their sense of their own identity.
Shelley, you said that there might be consequences for board staff who misled parents. When you're talking about board staff, who are you referring to?
I'm referring to anyone that might have been involved in giving information to parents to sign off on a field trip if, in fact, the field trip ended up not being what the parents thought it would be. And there are protocols, you know, it's submitted by teachers to principals to superintendents.
And what about the blue T-shirt story? There's a lot of rumors going around about who wore blue T-shirts, who had to wear, were they forced to wear blue T-shirts to be colonizers or to wear a Star of David? Is there anything that's true in any of this that you know? Can you set the record straight?
I wished I could, but I can't because I really do not have that information. I've read, as you've read, what's been reported on social media, and there have been contrary reports. Some said only some students were asked to wear blue. Others said all students were asked to wear blue. I know that there's been a significance of wearing blue because that's the color of water. I wished I could, but I do not have any of those answers.
You literally must have had a coronary when you first saw this without knowing all of this. What was your reaction when this first came, personally?
My reaction initially is, I know because I've been a trustee for many years, there are significant issues out there in community that come into our schools that we really can't control, but we can educate. This is an instance where I feel we've done it to ourselves, and that, I think, has upset me the most. And when we do it to ourselves, we significantly breach the public trust. And it really, I feel very upset because of the importance of public education in our system as a societal value. And I want us to be seen as providing the best possible experience for kids in Toronto. And when things like this happen, it diminishes further the public trust. And we all do our best, and I'm certainly trying to do my best to bring that trust back.
If I was a Jewish parent, I'd be thinking, I'm pulling my kids. That's it. This is the last straw.
I understand that. And I represent large areas of the city with large Jewish populations, and people with choice have chosen the public system. And my goal as a trustee is to keep people engaged with the public system and to provide a bit of a perspective. The vast majority of our teachers are excellent, engaging, respectful, ensure that every student in their class has a sense of belonging. And I just feel like there's a perspective that is missing, and why I specifically ask parents to reach out in my weekly update is you want to hear about all the experiences that this excursion provided, because I do not believe everyone continued on to Queen's Park. I don't believe everybody was chanting. I believe for some it was a true educational experience tied to the curriculum. So we just need the facts. And then most importantly, if we have to strengthen our policy, that is my role. We will do that. And if we have to hold staff accountable for strengthening the protocols, we will do that. So there's way more to be done here until we get back on track with the excursions. You don't have to have had a child directly affected. This is, the Toronto District School Board, 240,000 students. Everyone, whether you have kids in the system or not, wants the board to operate ethically, on principle, with student achievement and well-being, first and foremost, as their guiding principle. And these incidents betray that public trust, and we will do all, the best we can to seek the answers we all want and ensure that changes would be made so this does not happen again.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily. I put a link for you in our show notes to watch the school board's meeting on Wednesday live. We'll be covering the meeting, of course, so check the CJN.ca website for further updates. Several Jewish groups are planning to be on hand at the board office to protest, including Tough Sikh and also the Jewish Educators and Families Association, with founder Tamara Gotley.
So I think the thing about this issue, and it speaks to the disingenuous apology from the TDSB, where they say that they're working with families affected. First of all, families affected didn't even receive that apology. And secondly, the impact of this type of event goes well beyond just the students who attended. There's the students who didn't attend who are equally as impacted because this is just so corrosive to the school communities and, in fact, our broader society. We really trust our institutes of public education to, number one, keep our kids safe, and number two, to take their ethical and professional obligations seriously. And there was just such a breach of trust.
Our show is produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman. The executive producer is Michael Freeman, and our music is by Dov Beck-Levine. And the show's made possible in part thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Thanks for listening.